This DVMAX training session will pertain to the making of estimates for patient care. First, let's search for the client for whom the estimate will apply. In this case, a client whose last name starts with MANZ. We're taken directly to a Client General Information screen. All estimates will originate from such a screen. If we know the pet for whom the estimate will apply, we can click first on that pet's name. That way we have pre-selected the animal who will be named for the estimate. Then we can go to the Client menu and select Create an Estimate, or on a Windows machine, Control E for Estimate, or in a Macintosh, Apple E for Estimate. Either way, we're taken next to the selection of the primary provider of services. This means who will be the primary clinician for this particular estimate of services. The next step will take us directly to the estimate itself. This looks very much like an invoice, except there are additional fields of information. Notice there is a low quantity versus a high quantity. The animal might be staying with you for 2 days of hospitalization, or 3 or 4 or 5 days, thus a low versus a high quantity. You might anticipate 1 extracted tooth, or maybe there will be 3 extracted teeth, but you're not sure yet because you have not rendered those services yet. In addition, there is a low price versus a high price. If it's a surgery for which there might be a range of prices, you might not know exactly how long that procedure will take you. So there might be a low price as well as a high price, so that the client will be given a range of fees for this estimate. Those fees will then be multiplied together to render a low price extended price and a high price extended price. Those individual columns will then be totaled and shown in these, the low end versus the high end. Thus the client is given a range of fees. Notice this particular client also has a previous balance, which is also depicted on the estimate. If we know the first item for which we want to estimate a fee, we can type in that name of that item, in this case examination. By typing in EXAM, we're taken to a list of different items that begin with that string of letters. In this case, examination office call is what we wish. Notice we're estimating for a single office call, so there's a low quantity of 1, a high quantity of 1, a single price, and it extends out to be exactly the same price for the low end versus the high end. The next item we wish to add is a biopsy. If we type in the first few letters of the name of the item for which we want to estimate, we're then taken to a list of items that start with the same letters that were typed into the initial entry box, which was BIOPS. The item we're interested in this case, is a punch biopsy surgery. This particular item will permit us to enter a low price. Notice how the cursor has highlighted the price. If this were a fixed price, that would not be the case. Or we can enter in a high price. We have thus created a range in price from $79.75 up to $115. This can be done for any item that is priced adjustably, thus letting DVMAX permit the entry of a low price versus a high price for the estimate. If we don't know the first few letters of the item that we wish to provide on the estimate, but we do know the category within which that item will fall. For instance, DS for dental services, that's the beginning item code for the category of dental services. Notice that we're taken to a list of items that all start with DS in their code, but have varying names, but they all pertain to dental procedures. In this particular case, perhaps we're interested in extraction of a mature canine tooth. Notice we might anticipate the extraction of 1 tooth, or perhaps 2. The difference then will give us a low-end range of 1 tooth and a high-end range for 2 teeth. It's also possible to enter in super items or packages of items. For instance, if we type in the word dental, we're taken to a group of items that start with the word dental. Notice some of these items are labeled as packages, meaning a grouping of individual bill or estimate items that can be grouped together under one heading. If we select Dental Package Canine G1, that includes these particular bill items as child items, meaning that entry of that single item we selected a moment ago will drag with it onto the estimate each of these additional items. It also permits us to change the quantities while we're looking at this particular screen as well. For instance, we might not need the x-rays. If we don't need to take x-rays, we might put in a quantity of 0, but the high quantity will be 1. So either no x-rays or full mouth x-rays. And again, notice how these items add up individually. All of those child items were added to the estimate by virtue of the fact that we selected the parent item, which was called Dental Package Canine Grade 1, and that dragged with it all of the subsequent line items. This is an estimate. We have not provided these services yet. The animal has not received any of these items yet. The client has not really been billed for any of these items yet. It is specifically an estimate for services. Should a client leave a deposit with this estimate, it's possible to add the deposit directly to the estimate. Meaning, if the client will leave you a check in the amount of, say, $500, we can even enter in the check number, so that can be tallied in today's day-end sheet. And notice we have now taken a deposit for this amount. This will be recorded against these services for this client. We can print this estimate, or we can choose not to print it. Typically, we would print this because estimates can also be used as release forms, as in this particular case. That estimate has now been stored along with the client finances. Notice, there it is. It's an estimate for $606.97 up to $901.67 for a patient named Monk. Notice, too, that the deposit has also been recorded. That was the deposit we just entered upon the last estimate that was made. It's also possible to reopen this estimate at any time, and for those practices that are not paperless, it's possible to convert this estimate into an invoice. The catch here is we must pay attention to the quantities, because any item that was marked as a low-end quantity versus a high-end quantity will automatically convert onto an invoice using the low quantity. So it might be necessary to double-check those and re-enter those if necessary. In this case, let's convert this into an invoice. TV Max double checks by asking, are you sure that you want to convert that estimate into an invoice? If we click yes, convert it, we now are looking at exactly the same line items, except now they are participants on an actual invoice. Remember that the range in quantity for dental x-ray was 0 to 1. I just mentioned that we would use the low-end quantity when the conversion was made between an estimate to an invoice. So in this case, if indeed we did take those x-rays, we need to make sure that the quantity gets changed to 1. The same will be true for those extractions that we estimated for. We estimated for 1 to 2 extractions of a mature canine tooth. In this case, the low-end quantity was 1. In this case, perhaps that was the case, where we only took out 1 tooth. We now have converted an estimate into an invoice. This will only be useful for those practices that are not paperless. It's also important to know that you can edit a previously created estimate. If we search for that same client again for whom we've made a new estimate, that estimate will be stored under the Finances screen. Here is the new estimate that was made subsequent to the previous one. If we reopen that estimate, notice it has various items already entered onto it, in this case for a dental procedure, an exam, and dental x-rays. Let's suppose we now wish to edit the line items that are on that estimate. For instance, we can select a line, choose to edit that line, and now we have the ability to change the quantities. For instance, in this case, perhaps we want to have a 0 quantity as the low quantity and 1 as the high quantity. We can also change other items, for instance, the duration of anesthesia. In this case, we've estimated for half up to 1 hour. If we say we wish to edit that line item, we can say that indeed we might have 1.25 hours up to 2.2 hours. We have now edited that line. If there's a line that we don't feel we need any longer, meaning we wish to delete that line, we can click once to highlight the entire line, and then click the Delete Line button. That line is now gone. If we need to add more lines to this estimate, we can simply click the Add Line button, which will add lines individually so that we now have additional lines ready to go for the addition of new items. For instance, perhaps we need to add in something like an extraction. We can now put in extraction of a molar, which again, maybe there will be one extraction up to 3. We couldn't add this a moment ago because there were no lines upon which to make that entry. We now have a new estimate to replace the original one, and we can save this now with the client's record, and there it is. Notice they have the same number, meaning that this 74702 will replace the original 74702. In fact, if we try to open the original one, we even get a message stating that it has indeed been changed and has been replaced by the subsequent 74702.